Rest in peace upload schedule. This video took long enough to make for three major reasons. One, I couldn't afford it when it first came out, so that put me behind schedule right off the bat. Second, I have to actually play the game to get a good opinion of it, who would have guessed. And third, this game was released so unoptimized, broken, and just terribly not finished, to say the least, that it took me and my friends 3 days trying to find the right settings to make the game not only playable, but also not choke on a brick when I open my recording software. So it's been an eventful couple weeks, to say the least. Also, as kind of a heads up, I know a lot of you probably won't even care or notice, but this video isn't going to be as nicely presented as my Remnant video, because what you're seeing here is the only footage that didn't lag out my game into crashing, didn't crash my recording software or the game itself, or didn't get corrupted, and or wasn't just plain unwatchable because of all the stuttering and frame drops making it just turn to a slideshow. I really hate using the whole talking over unrelated gameplay footage template with no distant transitions or edits, but until whoever's in charge of fixing the game feels like actually doing their job, this is what we have to work with. But it's done, here we are, so get comfy, grab a snack, and let's take a look at Borderlands 3. So quick TLDR of Borderlands 3, if you really liked Borderlands 2, then definitely pick up this game. They did a great job at not trying to fix what wasn't broken and managed to make sure it didn't feel like a $60 DLC. If you didn't originally like Borderlands 2, then you're probably better off studying this one out. It's still the same formula of comedy and action, and if you were hoping they'd go a different direction from the last game, you'd be sorely disappointed. Now, if you've never played a Borderlands game or previous installments left you kind of indifferent, maybe this video will help you gain an idea as to what Borderlands 3 is all about. So first off, the gameplay. When the game isn't constantly dropping frames or stuttering, the gameplay is actually really fluid and high pace. Gunplay and movement is tight and responsive, allowing players to play the game according to their playstyle. From long distance sniping to close quarters shotgun parlays, the game never loses a sense of impact or weight behind your actions. Borderlands 3 carries over the same leveling and skill mechanics from previous games, but now you can better mix and match different skill trees, specifically with what skill power you want to use and how to use them. For instance, the character Flak can choose between being able to summon 2 birds for airstrikes, go invisible to deliver 3 quick critical shots, or supercharge the active pet to make them better engage enemies. Other characters like Zane can trade being able to use grenades for the ability to use a second skill. It's all a nice addition to the old formula that helps keep the builds fluid and varied from one another. Borderlands 3 also added a slide and heavy slam attack feature to the game. The slide is handy for keeping small trying to get to cover and get the occasional cool points, but the slam attack is honestly kind of pointless to the game. You can't do it from normal jumping, instead you have to do it from an elevated position, and it doesn't really do that much damage. It does about as much damage as a normal melee attack, which never really scaled well to begin with. They also added the option to skin and texture your gun, which adds a bit more customization to go with your heads and skins. Something that struck me really odd though is this feature to look at individual parts of the gun. It gave me the impression that we were going to be able to actually pick and choose between different pieces of the gun, which would be really freaking awesome. But all it really does is just let you look at what parts affect what stats, which is kind of useless information. I get the feeling this was going to be some kind of part customization system that only got about half developed and then didn't make the launch. But I don't know. I would love to see a system like that though, because for example, I hate using scopes in this game, and I would love the ability to actually use the iron sights instead, because I'm better with those. But who knows, maybe in a future update we'll see it. Overall, it's the same Borderlands formula that we're all familiar and used to with, just some new features thrown on the side to keep things interesting. It's not necessarily a bad thing because again, they didn't mess with what wasn't broken, but it does sometimes leave me feeling like I'm not really playing another title, more so just another expansion of Borderlands 2. Now of course we have the guns, one of the core elements to every Borderlands game ever. Borderlands 3 has new guns and old guns that have been revamped and updated to do bigger, better things, for the most part. Now, this is super subjective, so take what I say with a pinch of salt. In previous Borderlands games, the weapon brands were for the most part balanced out enough to where each brand had its own strength and weakness. For example, Jacobs had really high crit chance and high base damage but no elemental stuff. Bandit had lowered base damage but a high fire rate and high ammo capacity and could get the occasional elemental buff. Basically, it was a level playing field so that way each weapon could do its own thing without being completely overlooked by other companies. That is not the case in Borderlands 3. From what I've seen, it's a very clean-cut line between what's bad, okay, and good. Again, this is all my opinion from just trying them out myself on different characters using different builds, but in this game, Jacobs, Torg, and sometimes Dull are easily the best guns in the game. Vladov can be pretty good if using Mo's perk tree that gives you basically infinite ammo, but every other gun brand in this game is painfully meh. Like, half the brands like Dull, Vladov, Maliwan have this alternative fire mode system that lets you switch between what the gun does, like choosing between semi-automatic or burst fire, switching between two elements, or using an innate underbarrel weapon like a second gun or a grenade launcher. TDR gives the occasional good shotgun, but the novelty of guns with legs gets old pretty fast. Maliwan guns are just terrible in this game. The delayed shots from having to charge the guns are just annoying, the elemental damage is super situational. You're fighting an armored target and all you have is electric and fire type guns? Well, sucks to suck, I guess. Hyperion guns have such a painfully long reload animation and mediocre damage that their only saving grace is the shield that they generate when you aim down the sights. Again, all my opinion, but it's pretty clear Jacobs took all the oats in this game. The pistols and shotguns do a ton of base damage on top of having the highest crit chance and crit damage in the game. They make elemental damage basically completely null and void in this game. Also, they don't have me scrounging around for ammo every third reload. Seriously, why use a Dull or Vladov pistol that kills something in 5 to 6 shots when I can use a Jacobs that does it in 1 and ricochet the bullet into the guy next to him? Vladov and Dull have really decent damage output, but they just often feel like bullet hoses. You'll go through 300 rounds in a minute trying to kill 8 or 10 things, and good luck if a badass tank spawns. I really tried to stay varied and give each gun a chance, but in the end I just kept finding myself saying, "Screw it, honey, get my double barrel lever action single shot revolver. These tanks and psychos are getting mighty annoying." Now I don't think the issue is that Jacobs is overpowered, their rifles kind of fall off pretty hard sometimes, but more so I think every other brand is just way too weak to be worth using. I don't know, maybe it's just me, my playstyle, a lot of you are looking at me like I'm crazy, but we'll see in the comments. Overall, weapons have been one of the biggest parts of the Borderlands experience, and while there's a lot more interesting and variety types than Versus 2, there really needs to be a lot more balancing to actually help keep builds varied and keep playstyles from just being a Jacobs build, especially when it comes to the end game where you basically just work towards min-maxing your gear. So now the story and world. So here's the main thing that either really attracts players or pushes them away. Borderlands' story has really become a genre of its own type of storytelling. There's a ton of humor in Borderlands, so much so that it can actually get a bit exhausting after a while. I've always enjoyed the carefree, whimsical narrative of the game. The game really tries to hammer home that it really shouldn't be taken seriously 90% of the time. People die left and right, nothing is sacred, there's dark humor, toilet humor, political humor, pop culture humor. I mean, for Christ's sake, the TDR guns will occasionally yell yeet when you throw them. Hell, it was recently discovered that characters will actually giggle if you do 69 damage to something. Borderlands is a game that throws sophistication and subtlety right out the window, and that can be one of its greatest strengths and hardest weakness. I think we all know that one guy or friend who likes to tell jokes and doesn't really take much of anything seriously. They're fun to hang out with on Fridays and have the occasional beer with, but now imagine that you have to live or work with that person all the time, whatever makes you basically stuck with them every day. The non-stop jokes and carefree aura of them would just get really old to deal with really fast. And that's often the reason why people get turned off the Borderlands. There's rarely a serious moment in the game, and whenever there is, they gotta throw in a quick jab or joke right at the start or end of a situation. It's not that the jokes are bad, don't get me wrong. This game always has me grinning or smirking all the time. But, like I said, it just gets really tiring. And I really recommend that people take a break every few hours just to kind of get a breather from the non-stop jokes and incoherent screaming of enemies. As far as the actual story goes, there's not a lot I can say that isn't major spoilers. The story in this game revolves more around the vaults and the aliens that made them, which I appreciate because that's always kind of been the bigger picture of the Borderlands story and lore, but it always kind of took a backseat to whatever was happening around you. The other thing I really appreciate a lot is that your character actually talks on occasion based on what's happening around you. They say just enough to show some personality and input to a situation without completely taking the stage. The character you pick is basically now more of an actual character and not just an avatar that you move around. which is why it absolutely puzzles me why we just disappear from existence every time a major cutscene happens. Yeah, every time something major happens, like a fully rendered cutscene, we just flat out cease to exist. We're not acknowledged by the other characters or act out on what's happening. A very minor, no-context spoiler, a character dies literally right in front of us, and we just stand there watching it happen. There's a skirmish and everything, and we're just kind of watching from a safe distance off camera, I guess. You know, at least in Final Fantasy XIV, our characters will at least show some facial reaction or poise themselves to whatever's happening in front of them. It's not often we actually do something about what's happening, but at least we show that we're giving a crap about what's happening as it happens. But in Borderlands 3, we apparently just weren't worth rendering in those really important moments, I guess. The only other thing really worth mentioning about the story is the villains, the twins. Look, you're never going to replace Handsome Jack, and I'm glad they didn't try to. But these villains were already screwed right out the gate after Jack left the bar so damn high. First off, the whole streamer, YouTuber thing they had could have worked, but here's why it didn't. They were an almost relatable and fun take on how a lot of streamers have a near religious cult following that'll do seemingly anything for them. But the way they basically never shut up about how every little thing we do brings them subscribers and gets them trending on whatever social media they have, it gets old really fast. I mean, hell, their kind of catchphrase is literally, don't forget to like, subscribe, and obey. They just have this real, and I hate using this meme term because it's really annoying, but it's all I got for this case. They just have this really boomer tone to them. I don't know, maybe it's just because I've become a small-time YouTuber, so they're especially cringy for me. Like, every time I hear them talk, I just think to myself, God, I hope I don't come across like that. But putting the whole streamer thing aside, they're just honestly really boring villains. They don't pull any sympathy or empathy from the player, they're basically just annoying bandit leaders that don't become a real threat till like the end of the game. Now there's entire essays on YouTube that go into deep depth about why Handsome Jack was an amazing villain, so I won't do that here. This video's getting long enough. But the long and short of it is, Jack was an actual person who started from the bottom and rose to the top but lost his humanity and morality along the way. He wasn't always a crazy, unstable sociopath. He was a normal man with a wife and kid who got every bad roll of the dice a person can get in this universe. These twins, on the other hand, had a very glossed over backstory. Something about they were locked inside their home their whole childhood and they ended up killing their parents or something. I don't even remember anymore, it was so uninteresting. But you gotta remember, this is a cruel, edgy universe. People are dying from sickness, murder, kidnapping, getting hit by a car, becoming a cult sacrifice, drinking cyanide that got labeled as water. It's a miracle, honestly, if you make it past the age of 5. It's also common in this game that if you really want to make a tragic backstory, you really need to think outside the box. And the twin sob story, it's just another Tuesday for someone else there. Hell, the side character Ava has a worse backstory than the twins. After her parents were killed, she had to live in a sewer eating rats and keeping warm from whatever gas vented from their residential toilets, if you get my drift. That is a sad story in this game just for the pure fact that she didn't get the mercy of just being killed off. But these twins, on the other hand, they're just cookie cutter, power mad bad guys. Overall, the story in Borderlands 3 is a step up structure-wise, but Borderlands 2 had way more investment put into it. And of course, naturally, nothing's going to compare to the Telltale adaptation. In a sort of fortunate case, the universe itself has remained unchanged for the most part. Borderlands 3 is still a Borderlands game at its core. You shoot up bad guys and folks that look at you funny with wacky, lethal weapons that you find more often in clean water. While the story isn't a snooze fest by any means, it's still something that's been put in the background and honestly should stay there. All in all, Borderlands 3 is a step up from Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel, but it's really only a step and not much else. And that's not entirely a bad thing because Borderlands 2 was in a really good place to start off with. Borderlands 2 was a really great game and Borderlands 3 is basically more of that great game. Though the story is lacking, that's honestly something seasoned players of Borderlands are not even going to really notice or really care about. The gameplay is fantastic, the characters are wacky and entertaining, the loot is fun and rewarding, and overall it's just really hard to have a not good time with this game, especially with friends. So, do I recommend Borderlands 3? Absolutely. If you just want a casual fun time shooting crazy bandits, wildlife, and robots. but I would recommend holding off for a while if you don't have the best PC or a not PlayStation Pro. I know it's not the case for everyone, but for every one person I see saying that they're not having any problems, I see 12 other people desperately searching the forums and YouTube trying to find a way to play the game that they paid $60 to $100 for. I personally have an 8GB 1070 Ti with an additional 16 gigs of RAM. This game should be able to run on my PC on ultra settings with minimal effort. But instead, I basically have to set the game to very low settings, turn off everything that isn't a shadow, just to keep the game a stable 60 FPS with no stuttering. I've seen and been told that the game at least runs on console, but frame drops are persistent and the menus have been known to have serious input lag. This game clearly needed more time in the oven, but as usual, corporate deadlines took priority over actually finishing the game. I want to make a kind of personal note that might rub a lot of people the wrong way. But even though the companies are in charge and responsible for making the game optimized before launch, I can't help but kind of glare at the gamers who made bandwagons threatening to pirate the game for being temporarily an Epic Store exclusive. I'm just saying, if they weren't so pressured into having to worry about thousands of people pirating the game, maybe they would have did less stuffing the game with anti-pirating software and more making sure the game itself was actually ready for launch. Look, there's various ways to voice your concerns and disagreements to a company or business that don't involve stealing their product. But what's done is done, there's no going back, and we just need to hope they actually fix the game before it becomes old news. In the end, all technical issues put aside, Borderlands 3 is definitely one of the best titles to come out this year. Maybe even Game of the Year worthy, but probably not going to get it. It's an easy 8 out of 10 from me, but let me know what you guys think of the game in this video down below. Due to the amount of times I talked about guns, murder, and all the hyper-violence in this game, there's a really good chance this video is going to get demonetized. So, if anyone wants to consider my Patreon, it's greatly appreciated, links down below, and it helps me afford games like this to make videos about. Special thanks to these patrons on screen, you guys are awesome and help me make this whole thing possible. That's all I got for this video. As always, I'm the Reaper Hunter. I'll see y'all later.